So all of the MOUs that we signed on our last visit are really flourishing. So I've just come from a meeting of the Asian Smart Cities Research and Innovation Network. That's a collaboration between ourselves, BITS Pilani and IIT Kanpur, and it's now been extended to include the Tata Institute of Social Science. That's doing great work, really focusing on technological solutions at a local scale that can make a big impact on the lives of ordinary people. That's really its mission. So we're delighted to have signed that agreement. Our relationship with both of those institutions, I think, is set to expand significantly. We already have about 40 joint PhD students between those two institutions. We plan to double that over the next 3 to 4 years. So those relationships are really flourishing. On this visit, we've visited SRM University and VIT University, and in both of those cases we are either building on a pre-existing relationship or we're exploring a new one. But in both cases they're focused on staff and students. So staff collaboration and research, particularly around IT, like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, Internet of Things, data analytics, or for students, so articulation programs, exchange programs and so on. Now, of the ones we've visited this week, we have a long-standing relationship with SRM, so in a way it's not a new relationship, it's one that's been going for over a decade, but it had got to a point where both universities felt that the time was right to formalise the relationship and to give it a name. So we've called it a joint centre of eminence in artificial intelligence and Internet of Things. And underneath that underneath that umbrella, all of those existing activities will sit, but we also want to develop joint PhD programs there as well. So you're right that we do have a number of partnerships, but they're all important to us and they all have real life to them. What we're looking for is complementary research capability where we can combine resources to tackle some important questions. And the discussion we've just had in the ASCRIN roundtable, I think, really underlined the importance of some of the issues that group is addressing, the Smart Cities Research and Innovation Group. We're talking about things that are really quite humble, but of enormous practical significance. So detecting impurities in milk supply, for example, using very cheap to produce sensors. That's the kind of technology that we are working on as part of that network. So what we're interested in is collaborating with like-minded researchers who've got complementary expertise, who want to make an impact, who want to develop technology that's usable and scalable, that will make a real difference in people's lives. We have two prime reasons for partnering in the way we do in India. The first is that there is enormous talent here, enormous talent. The IITs, the SRMs, the VITs are elite institutions that have some of the brightest young Indians as students. We want to work with those young people. We want to bring them into our university to help develop them. Some of them might stay and do a PhD with us. We'd love that. They might even come and work for us as academics. We'd love that too. But then they could come back to India with exposure to a different culture and development of their academic skills. So that's the first reason, is access to the talent pool. The second, and we've just had a really interesting discussion about this, how do we best engage with industry and government? Because as a university, what we're interested in is having an impact, but the best way we can have an impact is by making sure that our research translates into some real world project. And the best ways we can do that are by working with government and industry. So we just had a discussion about how the three partner universities can do that better. And I think one of the aspects of our collaborations is that we work with like-minded universities who are not just interested in the pure research or the glamorous, high-level, very academic research. We're actually interested in getting our ideas, our technology out there and making a difference. So that milk sensor product, for example, can have an enormous impact, for example, on farming cooperatives who might pool their milk supplies, and it would be of enormous benefit to them if they were able to detect impurities in milk coming from one of their members before they pool it and potentially lose the whole lot. So it's practical solutions to practical problems that make a difference in people's lives that we're very committed to. So we don't just partner with anyone, we partner with institutions that have really smart people and are committed to making a difference. Such a huge amount, because a lot of the problems that we're tackling are in large part social problems. Problems of social organisation, social behaviour, government, governance, and implementation of large-scale social programmes. That's what social scientists do. We can come up with clever technology solutions, but you also need an understanding of how those solutions are going to be implemented and how they're going to be taken up and used. And that's what the social scientists bring to this network. So they're a vital component to sit alongside the computer engineers, the AI specialists. So it's multidisciplinary, because that's the way we're going to solve problems in the real world most effectively. Two distinguishing characteristics. One is that it's multidisciplinary, and it has to be, because we're looking at real world problems. So how do you control or manage traffic more effectively in a large city? Now technology, sensoring, Internet of Things, data analytics can all help with that, but there are other dimensions as well. As I said, there are the social and government dimensions that have to be brought into the picture. So if you're going to solve big social problems, you need a wide range of expertise, and that's what this network pulls together from some outstanding people. But it also needs to work in partnership with the governments and the industries who are actually going to implement it. So it's multidisciplinary, and it's what we call translational. It's taking the smart ideas that the researchers working together come up with and finding a way to actually implement them. So I think it's those two characteristics. It's the multidisciplinarity and it's the translational, the taking the ideas out to the wider world and solving a problem. That's the real difference. So we heard from Kunal Kumar about his thinking about how a network like ours should approach the question of supporting the smart city agenda. And he was very clear that we need to situate our definition of the problem very clearly in an Indian context. India is so different in so many ways that, coming from a sort of developed country with a kind of Western tradition, you have to be very careful about making assumptions about the kind of solutions that are going to work in a different context. So he spoke at the beginning and he talked about the importance of being very clear about how you define a problem. So he, I think, is very engaged with what we're trying to do, but I think cautioning us to be absolutely clear about the context for the solutions we're devising and having a really good understanding of those. I mean, he talked, for example, about urbanisation and how in India, in Indian cities, 70% of the dwellings that will be occupied by the middle of this century have yet to be built. Whereas in a European city, the equivalent number is 10%. So the Europeans have actually got a big problem that they've got to, in some way, modernise an existing housing stock to a much greater extent than India has to, because India has yet to build most of it. Now that's a huge opportunity for India to get the design and the implementation right between now and the middle of the century, but it's a very different context from the context that we might face in Australia or in Western Europe. So that was the kind of point that he was trying to make, and I think he made it really well. Well, I've given you the milk example. Another area that we're looking at, and which is transportable across national boundaries, has to do with agriculture and protected cropping in agriculture. Now this is another multidisciplinary area where you bring together people with expertise in soil science and seeds and grains with artificial intelligence, Internet of Things. So how do you optimise growing conditions in artificial environments to maximise crop output? Protected cropping is going to become a bigger part of the agriculture mix as the climate gets harsher. It'll become harder to grow crops successfully in the traditional way out in the open air. We're increasingly going to have to rely on artificial or protected environments to grow things. Now this is a universal issue for the whole planet, frankly, but there is a lot of interest here in that, and there's a lot of interest around the world in that. So that's an area where we can collaborate for global outcomes. But there are others where the solution is uniquely Indian, and where the challenge is scale, because there's no, as someone said today, there's no point devising a solution that requires a supercomputer in every field. That's just not going to work. No one can afford that. You've got to find what Mr. Kumar called affordable excellence. You've got to find solutions that work, solve a problem effectively, but which people can afford. And that's really the challenge, and that's what Askrin is about. So joint PhDs are a fantastic way of bringing two organisations together. Usually what happens is that the students will be jointly supervised by an academic from each institution, and they'll work together on the PhD topic, whatever it is. Sometimes it will involve the PhD student spending a bit of time in the other institution. Now, most of the students coming into these programs are Indian students, so they will be based in their home institution, IIT Kanpur or BITS Pilani, but might spend some time in Australia with their other supervisor from the other university. Now, we've found that those co-supervisory relationships are really, really great ways of gluing the two universities together. And we've got ambitions, as I said earlier, to double the number of joint PhDs we offer with both of those partner institutions. They produce great research, and they help to tie the research agendas and capabilities of the two organisations much more tightly together. We already have a very extensive scholarship programme for undergraduate, postgraduate and PhD. Some of them are tied to specific partnerships like the JSS relationship. Some are just open for students from particular parts of the world. Some of them are incredibly generous. So there are a couple a year we offer that completely exempt students from fees altogether. So that's worth a lot of money. Some of them are generously sponsored in the name of a particular individual. So the Shah Rukh Khan scholarship, for example, is very valuable. That's for a PhD student. It means that that student does not have to pay any fee for their PhD, and they get a stipend while they're studying. So there's a whole range of scholarships, and some of them are incredibly valuable to the holder. We have an open mind on that, but we have a lot of very good partnerships already here. We have a lot of students already studying with us through those joint arrangements that we've talked about. So we're not certain yet what the benefit would be to India in particular, or to us, of opening a physical campus. But if we thought that it would be a valuable thing, and this is not just about us, this is about India, your national education policy, can we help contribute to the goals of that policy? Then we would give it very careful consideration. But right now, we're not thinking about doing it on our own. We might think about doing it in collaboration with others, but that's something that we're thinking about at the moment. But what we don't want to do is to jeopardize the really strong partnerships we already have. The Trobe has been partnered with Indian organizations for over 30 years. So we have an exchange agreement, for example, with Lady Shri Ram College in the University of Delhi. That is over 30 years old. The partnership we have with SRM University goes back more than a decade. So these are long-standing relationships. We don't want to do anything that would jeopardize those. We would only do it if we thought it would strengthen those relationships and support the Indian education policy.